This video is on the science behind how limiting or reducing mind wandering actually is a pretty incredible tool for enhancing our levels of happiness. So we're going to break down a paper that's titled "A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind." So the title kind of gives it away, right? So the more your mind wanders, the more you have a tendency to be unhappy. And conversely, a focused mind is going to lead to higher levels of happiness. So this paper was published in the journal Science, and it's by Matt Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert, and it's become kind of a classic, a very well-researched and well-cited paper. And in this paper, they take a sample of 2,250 adults, and they devised a way to contact them throughout their daily life. And so they did this, it wasn't just a one-time thing, they did this over an extended period. And they would check in, and they would ask them a few questions, but the primary things they were focused on are, what are you doing? And what are you feeling? So, examples, hey, I'm cleaning up the house, or I'm just sitting around watching TV, or I'm doing work tasks, or I'm exercising. And so they're in the natural environment, right? Not in a laboratory. And then they would check in, what is your emotional state? Are you happy, you unhappy, neutral, are you upset, are you whatever? And then perhaps most importantly for this study, they looked at what they were focused on. Or should I say, were they focused on the activity that they were reported that they were doing, or was their focus away from the activity that they were doing in that given moment? And see, so you have, what are you doing, right? Checking in on that, checking in on your emotional state, and then checking in on where your attention is relative to what you're doing. And what they found was pretty interesting. Is that regardless of activity type and engagement, whatever you're doing in that moment, the tendency to mind wander, so your attention or your focus being away from whatever you were doing in that moment, predicted lower levels of happiness and positive emotion. And what's most interesting here is that it was true even if you're doing kind of an unpleasant activity or an activity that you don't like, it was better to remain present or focused in that activity. And so they looked at too, does the mind tend to wander, or, what are the consequences of the mind wandering to more pleasant or not so pleasant things? Interestingly, they found that we tend to mind wander to more pleasant things, which is maybe good news, but about 43% of the time it's more pleasant things, about 27% of the time it's more unpleasant things, and then whatever that remaining percentage is, about 30% is more neutral. But importantly, even when the mind wandered to pleasant topics, they were no happier than when they were doing the current activity in a focused way. In fact, what we find is that the focus on what we're doing is very powerful. And so regardless of if we like the activity or don't like it, if the activity itself is pleasant or not, and regardless of if the mind is wandering to unpleasant things or unpleasant things, across any of those cases, it is much better off to be focused and present with whatever you're doing. And so that's counterintuitive, because you probably think, well, if it's an activity that's unpleasant and the mind's wandering to something pleasant, I'm going to be happier doing that. That's not the case. The researchers write that their evidence strongly suggests that mind wandering across the board is the cause, not the consequence of negative emotions. In other words, we sometimes tend to think, and there's some literature on this that suggests that when we're in a negative state, we're anxious or we're stressed or we're upset, the mind tends to wander more. What they're saying is that it actually often is the mind wandering that leads to the more negative emotional state. So when we are not focused, we are not present and engaged with whatever it is that we're doing, we are far less happy regardless of the circumstances. So then this tees up this idea of, well, then what can we do about this? And it's probably not the subject for this video, and they don't go too far into it in the paper. Of course, we can cultivate our ability to be present or to be focused or to limit mind wandering through cognitive practices like meditation, because mindfulness meditation, all that really is, I sometimes explain it, is training or a exercise for your focus attention muscle, because imagine you're focusing on your breathing, your mind wanders off into thoughts of the day, what you're going to have for lunch, who you should talk to, blah, blah, blah. and you bring it back to your breathing, right? Every time you do that, you just did a repetition of grabbing that wandering mind and anchoring your focus back to the thing that you want to be focusing on. So that's a very short summary, but the important point there is that having talked about how a wandering mind reduces happiness levels, importantly, we are not doomed. We can train our mind to reduce that wandering tendency, to cultivate our focus through, again, these cognitive practices like meditation. And what this research finds is that the more we can limit mind wandering and the more we can be focused and engaged with whatever it is we're doing, the happier we're going to be. So that's it for this video. Here's another one on some science-based tools for being happier in work and life. Of course, that's what I cover on this channel. So you can find plenty more videos like this where I break down research and practical tools to help you be happier in everyday life. This has been Jackson Kirchis. Thanks for watching.